Chapter 3. Willie lassos a billy goat. Now it was late November. Cold winds were blowing strongly across the prairie. Out in front of the big white Rogers house, Willie was busy. He was hurrying to finish his work because the wind was icy. He had brought a big armful of straw from the barn. He was packing it around Mama's rose bushes. But he wasn't thinking about rose bushes. He was thinking about roping. He wondered how soon Dan would show him some tricks. He got to the last rose bush. He piled the straw around it carefully. He turned to see Papa riding up. Mr. Rogers slid down from his horse. He picked the boy up and lifted him high in the air. "It's good to see you, son." "We thought you'd never get back," Willie said. "Did you just ride in from Tahlequah?" "Just this minute." "Have you finished your work?" "Let's go inside." Willie rushed off to his room to get his rope. He'd been working all afternoon, and now his chores were done. He got out his rope and walked downstairs, shaking it out. He stood in the hall and looked around for something to lasso. He could hear Mama and Papa talking in the front room. "How are things at Tahlequah?" Mama was asking. "We had a long meeting with all the Cherokee officials," said Papa. He sighed. "Running the territory is a pretty big job. I got one interesting piece of news." "What's that, Clem?" "There's going to be a new school not too far away from here. Going to be called Drumgoole." "Are you thinking of Willie?" his wife asked. Willie was about to throw a loop at the stair post. He stopped to listen. "School?" he thought. "How can I be a cowboy if I have to go to school?" "That's right," Papa replied. "Hughie was 6 just this month. He'll have to go to school next year. I want that boy to learn something besides tending cattle. I want him to amount to something." "To amount to something? More than being a cowpuncher? What did that mean?" Willie made the loop, threw it easily, and lassoed a chair. Papa looked up. "Willie, I'm surprised your mother let you throw that rope in the house. How about it, Mary?" "Well," said his mother, "I've told him to be careful." "Sure, Papa," said Willie. "I won't break anything. I keep this little rope around all the time. That way I can practice whenever I feel like it." "Well, next year you have something else to think about. You'll be going to school." "Oh, Papa, I don't want to go to school. How can I learn to be a top cowhand if I have to go to school?" "I want you to be a top hand, all right. But you'll be more than that when you grow up, if I have anything to say about it," said Papa. "You'll need all the book learning you can get." "Papa, what's better than being a top hand? What's amounting to something?" "You'll find out about that soon enough," said Papa. "There's going to be a new school near here," Mama put in, "up beyond your sister Sally's." "Is Charlie going too?" Willie asked. "Yes, he's going to school," said Mr. Rogers, "but I imagine he'll go to Uwalla. That's on his side of the river. You can't count on crossing the verdigris safely all winter." "You mean I can't go to the same school as Charlie?" "There will be plenty of other boys and girls at Drumgoole," said Mr. Rogers. "You can make lots of new friends." Willie was playing idly with his lasso. He threw it at a straight-backed chair in the corner. He lassoed the chair, but he pulled too hard, and the chair fell over with a crash. Mr. Rogers jumped at the noise. "William Penn Adair Rogers, I don't care what your mother says. You take that rope right out of this house if you want to play." "All right, Papa," said Willie good-naturedly. "But do I really have to go to school next year?" "You bet you do," said his father. Spring came on the Rogers ranch. The grass on the prairies was beginning to turn green. The cattle had all been rounded up and separated and put out to graze. They were getting frisky in the balmy air. They roamed in search of the early shoots of bright green that dotted the plain. So the Rogers cowboys had a little time for other work, breaking wild horses. Down by the barn, Willie was thinking about the wild horses. He hurried to put water in pans for the chickens. Then he ran down to the horse corral to see what was going on. The cowboys were bringing in a big black horse. He was very skittish. He pranced. He tried to pull away, but he was held securely by lassos. The cowboys turned him loose in a large pen filled with wild horses. The black tossed his head. He gave a loud whinny and dashed off to join the others. "Well, young fellow," said Barney jokingly, Want to bust that black bronco? I sure would like to, said Willie. Are you going to break him today? Hardly, said Barney. He's too wild yet, and we'd be sure to ruin him. But we've got some horses ready to ride. That roan over there, for one. Willie looked at the big roan, wandering restlessly around the corral. He looked just as wild as the black. How could anyone ride him? Willie knew all the broncos would have to be trained to be good cow ponies, but he didn't see how they could ever be tamed. Are you going to ride that one? He asked. I'm going to try, said Barney. Looks like it'll be some jamboree. The cowboys got ready to saddle the roan. First they hobbled him. Barney walked up slowly with the saddle as the other men held the horse. Already a rough rope bridle had been put on. The horse was shaking his head as if to say he didn't like it. Here, boy, this won't hurt you, Barney said quietly to the roan. Quickly he threw the saddle over the horse's back. In a twinkling he fastened the cinch strap under the horse's belly. The horse wasn't used to a saddle on his back. He whinnied loudly. He jumped straight up and down 4 or 5 times, trying to kick out his heels at the same time. Look at him buck, Willie called. He knew it was dangerous, but he wished he could be the one to try to ride the wild horse. The cowboys moved in again as soon as the horse had quieted down a little. 2 of them held the bridle while Barney walked to the horse's side. Take off the hobbles, he said quietly. 2 of the men removed the ropes holding the horse's feet. Quickly Barney vaulted to the saddle. Turn him loose! The cowboys jumped aside. The roan was so startled to find Barney on his back that at first he merely trotted around. Barney's got him, shouted Willie. Not so fast there, said one of the cowboys. Now look. All of a sudden the horse seemed to explode. He jumped up and down. He arched his back. He kept his legs stiff. Every time he hit the ground, he gave Barney a terrible jolt. Look at him crow hop, yelled one of the hens. Hold him, Barney, called Willie. The horse bucked 4 or 5 times as hard as he could. Then he jumped high in the air. He twisted completely around in the air. When he came down, he was headed in the opposite direction. Barney lurched to one side. He just managed to hold on. Up went the fiery little horse again. Again he turned completely in midair. Barney couldn't hold on anymore. He sailed off the horse's back. The roan whinnied triumphantly and galloped off to the far corner of the pasture. Barney jumped up and dusted himself off. Well, I'll get him next time, he said. That uppity critter won't get the best of me. Seems as though that horse doesn't like you very well, Barney, said Willie. Or maybe he just doesn't want to go to work as a cow pony. He'll be a good cow pony, Willie, you'll see, said Barney. Why, look who's coming. Willie looked up. There came the buggy with his mother, and sitting beside her was Charlie McClellan. Alongside them rode Papa and Dan Walker. Dan was trailing a little sorrel mare. Willie shouted, You should have seen Barney breaking a bronco. Willie, Papa called, I've got a surprise for you. Come look at this pony. He took the bridle from Dan. The sorrel was a lively mare, prancing and frisky. Willie, Papa went on, my father used to say, see that Clem always rides his own horse. I want you to ride your own horse always too. So here you are, Willie. She's yours. At first, Willie couldn't speak. He couldn't take his eyes off the horse. He patted her sleek sides. He rubbed her nose and spoke to her. She was very friendly. She seemed to like Willie. Thanks, Papa, he finally managed to say. She's wonderful. Let me ride her right now. Mr. Rogers handed Willie the reins. Willie put his left foot in the stirrup and started to swing himself into the saddle. Suddenly, the little mare reared up on her hind legs. She plunged forward. Watch out, Willie, his mother called in alarm. But Willie was ready. Nimbly he stepped out of the stirrup and said to the horse, Steady, girl, steady. The horse quieted down again. Well, what do you think of that? Said Papa to Dan. Look at that boy handle that horse. Better give him a hand, Dan. Looks as though she's head shy, Willie, said Dan. Better let me hold her until she gets used to you. Dan took a firm hold on the bridle. Willie put his foot in the stirrup again, and this time swung into the saddle. The sorrel started to rear again, but Dan held her steady. Mama covered her face with her hands. Clem, You're going to get my boy killed." "Now, Mary, that's really a gentle pony," Papa said. "Look at Willie now." Willie was trotting along happily. The mare was behaving perfectly. Willie rode around the corral, then trotted up to the buggy. "See, Mama," he said proudly. "Isn't she wonderful?" "Ha, you," said Charlie. "That's certainly true. What are you going to call her?" Willie paused to consider. Finally he said, "Robin. It's a name I like, and Robin will like it too. Now, Charlie, you take a ride." Willie started to dismount. Again the sorrel began to rear. Dan grabbed for her bridle. Willie jumped safely to the ground. "Oh, Clem, I don't think that horse is safe," Mama said. "I guess someone will have to hold her until she gets over being head shy," said Papa. "But don't you worry. Willie's going to be a real horseman." "Please don't worry, Mrs. Rogers," Barney chimed in. "Don't you remember how Willie used to beg rides from any cowboy that would take him? I used to put him on a pillow back of the saddle horn when he could barely walk. Willie belongs on a horse." "It's Charlie's turn to ride now," said Willie, "and then we'll go down and show Mac and Charlotte." By the time Willie and Charlie got down to Dan's cabin, the little sorrel seemed tired from so much riding, so they let her graze while they played. Willie was going to take good care of his horse. "You should have seen Barney on that bronco," said Willie. "Tell us about it," Mac said. "Here, I'll show you," said Willie. He picked up an old saddle and buckled it on his back. Then he got down on all fours. "Come on, Mac, let's see if I can throw you," he called. "You mean you want me to ride?" "Go on," said Charlotte. "Give him a good ride. Remember how he tried to lasso me." "Here goes," shouted Mac. He got into the saddle. Willie began to jump up and down like the wild horse Barney had been trying to ride. He jumped forward. He jumped back. He ran around as fast as he could on his hands and knees. "You must hold on with only one hand, Mac," Charlie called. "That's the rule of bronco busting." "That's all I'm using, but I haven't got any reins. Whoopee!" Willie bucked and jumped, and Mac hung on, until both boys were so tired they rolled over on the ground. They sat up and panted to catch their breath. "What'll we do now, Willie?" asked Charlotte. Willie looked around. Over in the fence corner were several of the walkers' goats, munching grass. "Wait till I get out my rope," he said. "We'll take turns lassoing goats." He uncoiled his rope from around his waist. He handed it to Charlotte. Then he drew a line in the dirt with his heel. "We have to stand right here," he said. "Go ahead, Charlotte. See what you can do." Charlotte quickly made a loop. She'd been practicing since Willie first chased her with a lasso. She made a nice throw at the nearest goat, but she missed. The old billy goat didn't pay much attention to the rope. He just glanced up and went on eating. Charlie tried, but he missed. So did Mac. Then Willie took the rope. Carefully he made his loop and took aim. Out shot the rope and caught the billy goat's horns. This time the goat was annoyed. He bleated loudly and started to run, shaking his head to get away from the rope. But Willie knew what to do. He braced himself as Dan had shown him. Crack! The rope drew tight. The goat was pulled right off his feet. "Hurrah!" shouted Mac and Charlotte and Charlie. "Willie wins!" Willie was feeling pretty good about roping the goat on the first try. He ran up to get his lasso free. He shook it out and started to coil it up. He was so interested in his rope, he didn't notice what the goat was doing. He knew he hadn't heard it. "Watch out, Willie!" called Charlotte. Willie looked back, but too late. There came the billy goat, head down, straight for him. Before Willie could move, the goat butted him hard. He rolled over on the ground. The other children laughed and laughed. "Willie, you look so funny," Charlotte gasped. "Are you all right?" asked Charlie. "Sure," said Willie. He brushed himself off. He looked over at the goat, now munching grass contentedly. Then he burst out laughing too. "That sure was the angriest looking goat I ever saw," he said.